performance of literature takes as its kind of foundation that any literature, anything that is on the page, a poem, a short story, a novel, a newspaper article, something that's even digital, a tweet, is best understood when it is vocalized and embodied. In other words, anything written is an act of speech. And so a way to fully appreciate and connect with and communicate literature is through performance, and that's kind of the crux of that course. So I had read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me when it first came out in 2015. Was unbelievably moved by this book. Always felt that in some way I wanted to introduce it into a class, teach it in some capacity. And so when I was teaching performance of literature this past fall, I decided that while all the other performances allowed students to choose whatever they wanted to perform, so wide ranges of poetry, different kinds of prose, different kinds of drama, everything was their choice. I wanted to teach a nonfiction text, this book, that everybody had to perform in one way or another. And I knew that it would touch people in different ways, and it did. And I thought it was particularly, from a narrator point of view, the person who wrote this, right? He wrote it ostensibly to his 15-year-old son, but he also published it. And so it's to a much wider audience. And so people are going to connect to it in different ways. In this group right here, how many of you have read this book? So great. So a lot of you have, which I'm not surprised to see. And so you had a personal connection to it. So what we decided to do, because people in class really did connect to it in a lot of different ways, and a few people actually had trouble connecting to it, I decided that in the spirit of a really intertextual kind of approach, I wanted the students to choose a passage from this that they really, that they liked, that they were moved by, that spoke to them in some way, and then they had to kind of marry that passage to another piece of literature, a poem or another part of a short story or a spoken word piece or a rap or anything. And so everybody came up with very individualized pieces. And I was kind of blown away by the work that was done, which led me to coerce them into agreeing to be part of Freedom School. So what you're going to see are these performances that were scripted from passages in here and juxtaposed or complemented with other pieces of literature, and they're going to explain what they did. All right, and now before I shut up and move on with this, I have two more quick things to explain. This was supposed to be a bigger group of students performing. Two people, Kathy Gagliano and Anthony Lario, both ended up with health problems that prevented them from being able to be here. And then another student, Tina Hong, for a number of different reasons, didn't want to share the piece. However, I love her script so much that she gave me permission to perform hers. So I'm actually going to do hers, although I'm not going to do it justice, and I don't have it memorized. But I just loved her script, and I wanted to be able to have it shared with a larger audience. Okay, so you'll see three pieces, and then hopefully we'll have a chance to talk. So first is going to be Kevon Turner, then Deanna Starr, and then I'll do Tina Holmes.
Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks again, Dr. Heidi Rose, for organizing this for us. So my piece is actually structured off of James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. I organized it in a way to make it seem like the two writers, thinkers, are having a bit of a dialogue, almost like an interview. So you'll see things where James says something, and maybe you hear Ta-Nehisi respond. I'm going to try to make it somewhat clear who's saying what, but we'll also leave the nuance of the performance up to your interpretation, and hopefully the message will shine through. So thanks again for being here. I hope you enjoy the performance. When I looked at the children, their brown, copper, and beige faces staring up at me as I taught Sunday school, I felt that I was committing a crime in talking about the gentle Jesus, in telling them to reconcile themselves to their misery on earth in order to gain the crown of eternal life. But God or not, the armor is all over them, and it is real. I would consider it like a life extension, some sort of loan, allowing you to take the debts heaped upon you now and pay them off later. The blood of the Lamb had not cleansed me. I was still as black as I had been the day that I was born. And therefore, when facing a congregation, it took all the strength I had not to stammer, not to curse, not to tell them to throw away their Bibles, get up off their knees, and go home and organize, for example, a rent strike. Have you ever taken a look at the photos from the sit-ins in the 60s? A hard, serious look? Have you ever looked at the faces? The faces are neither angry, nor sad, nor joyous. They portray almost no emotion. They look past their tormentors, past us, and focus on something way beyond anything known to me. I think they are fastened to their God, a God whom I cannot know and in whom I do not believe. We're only Negroes to bear this crown. Was heaven then to be merely another ghetto? Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Deanna Starr.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Hello, I'm Deanna. I was in Dr. Rose's class, and I decided to juxtapose my excerpts of Ta-Nehisi Coates with, oh, thank you, Cliff, for recording it. I appreciate it. I decided to juxtapose the excerpts from Ta-Nehisi Coates with some J. Cole lyrics. I don't know if anybody here is J. Cole fan, but he is or has been known to have some politically charged rap lyrics. And this is from one of his older albums, but I decided to put them together, and I'm playing two parts of the self. So I'm going to try, like Yvonne, to make that point clear, but it is one person kind of wrestling with two parts of themselves and their past in a way. So I hope that you enjoy it and understand. We'll leave room for questions later. Can the nerd and the nigga coexist? They gonna have to, nerd. But nigga, it doesn't make sense. I didn't spend 4 years in the Ivy learning how to think, talk, and feel. Hold up now, just to jump into a rage every time they try and kill me. Shut up, nerd. You ain't hear a word I said. I gotta smack you upside your well-brushed head. See, these kids out here, they need you. But they think they can't relate because you act so removed. But what they are, nerd, is you. Because no matter how much you try to deny the way you think, talk, and feel, your daddy still smoke heroin, your brother still on crack, ghetto nightmares still haunt your dreams, and your mama's still black. So what I'm saying, nerd, is not that you have to become me, but one thing is true. It's time, nerd, to journey to the nigga in you. I had a convo with the president. I paid to go and see him. Thinking about all the things that I would say when I would see him, getting nervous, sitting in a room full of white folks, thinking about the black man plight. I think I might choke. I raised my hand to ask the man a question. Do you see the struggles of your brothers in oppression? And if so, if you got all the power and the clout, as the president, what's stopping you from helping niggas out? Well, I didn't say niggas, but you catch my drift. See, today, when 8% of the world's prisoners are black men, black bodies have refinanced the dream of being white. Black life is cheap, but in America, black bodies are a natural resource of incomparable value. Oh, American hypocrisy, oh, let me count the ways. Came here seeking freedom, yet you end up owning slaves. Justified using what Christianity would say, Religion don't mean shit. It's too much ego in the way. But you exist. You matter. You have value. You have every right to wear your hoodie and play your music as loud as you want. You have every right to be you. You have to be you. And no one should ever deter you from being you. And you should never be afraid to be you. Thank you.
So Tina Hong, a student in my class, found this poem by Sharon Olds called On the Subway, which is from the perspective of a white woman. And she juxtaposed it with this portion of Between the World of Me, which is obviously from the perspective of a black man. So she put them together. There are definitely two personas in there, the African-American man, the white American woman. And so this is Tina Hong's script from Between the World and Me and Sharon Olds On the Subway. I am writing to you because this was the year you saw Eric Garner choked to death for selling cigarettes. Because you know now that Renisha McBride was shot for seeking help. That John Crawford was shot down for browsing in a department store. And you have seen men in uniform drive by and murder Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child whom they were oath-bound to protect. And you have seen men in the same uniform pummel Marlene Pinnock, someone's grandmother, on the side of the road. And you know now, if you did not before, that he is black. And I am white. And without meaning or trying to, I must profit from his darkness, the way he absorbs the murderous beams of the nation's heart, as black cotton absorbs the heat of the sun and holds it. He has the casual, cold look of a mugger, alert under hooded lids. He's wearing red, like the inside of a body exposed. I'm wearing dark fur, the whole skin of an animal taken and used. I look at his raw face. He looks at my fur coat. And I don't know if I'm in his power. He could take my coat so easily, my briefcase, my life. Or if he is in my power, the way I am living off of his life, eating the steak he does not eat, as if I'm taking the food from his mouth. There is no way to know how easy this white skin makes my life. This life he could take so easily and break across his knee like a stick, the way his own back is being broken. The rod of his soul that at birth was dark and fluid and rich, as the heart of a seedling ready to thrust up in any available light. I write to you in your 15th year. It is hard to face this, but all our phrasing, race relations, racial chasm, racial justice, racial profiling, racial and white privilege, even white supremacy, serves to obscure that racism is visceral. visceral experience, that it dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscle, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth. You must never look away from this. So, I feel obliged to tell you one other, just like, I want to share what a couple other students did, and let's just sit down here. I would love to hear what you saw, what you heard, what you thought. Anthony Lario, who was supposed to perform, took a passage from Coates where the part where he was on the Upper East Side at the movies, and he was with his little boy, and there's a crowd coming out and going down an escalator. A white woman tries to tell his kid you're in my way, get out of the way, and he has a visceral reaction to this. And Anthony shows a whole bunch of tweets and Facebook posts, and he pulled from some other sources as well to create kind of the mindset of this woman. We never get inside her head, in the book. We just get his story, but he put them against each other in some really kind of interesting ways to show her, inherent racism. And then, and Kathy Gagliano, this other student who was supposed to perform, she did a really interesting take on the national anthem. She spoke the words of the national anthem, but then she did a sort of symbolic twist into taking the knee, and weaved then some portions of the book into that. So I just wanted to share those because they were all so very different kinds of texts, brought into conversation with Coates, and to show how much he inspires. Okay, so you guys want to say anything or ask questions?
I'm just curious if you have any questions, comments, anything about the process of putting it together, the performances themselves. I think I said all that I could say. I don't know about you. Keep going.
Yeah. Also, just open the questions. If you have to do a write-up assignment, if there's anything that will further your understanding of the performances and the context that they exist in, we'd be more than happy to answer questions.
And even if things weren't clear. Sorry, go ahead.
I kind of had a question, and it's for two students here. In Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, he talks a lot about the black body. And I just wanted to know if you ever struggle with this, because sometimes I struggle because I feel as though I'm trapped within that body. And just to a point of clarity, I'm not talking about Stokely Carmichael's Black is Beautiful black body. I'm talking about the black body that was created to replace a culture with a color. So we're no longer Ashanti, Zulu, we're black. So do you ever feel trapped by the stigma associated with that, and how do you respond to the world as being conscious of that?
Oh, okay. I think that's a really good question, and I think that it's something that you have to develop to respond to in your own way over time, because you're in this body. Well, from when you're young, whenever you get that first realization of wow, my blackness or my black body means something, and whether that be positive or negative depending on the context, we all have that realization at some point, or have a story or anecdote to tell of when we realize that, So I guess my personal response and my self right now, or where I am in my life right now, as a response is being conscious of it, but in the way of knowing how and when it is appropriate to respond. I don't know if that makes sense. So take Villanova's campus, for instance, juxtaposed against where I grew up, where I grew up in New York City, just for a contextual background, but it's very, very different. So knowing what my blackness means in this context and how I choose to demonstrate it in this context which is different than Kevon, different than you or anyone else, you know? So knowing what that means here and the different places I go throughout my life and how I choose to demonstrate it. And if I don't decide, you know, stuff like that. Just a quick example for people, we do have like a Black Cultural Society here on campus. But if another Black student on campus chooses not to be a part of the Black Cultural Society, not taking that as they're trying to stray away from their Blackness, you know, like let them be individual in their Blackness, you know, that, just for an example.
Yeah, and I would say, well, first of all, yeah, I do relate to that feeling, and I understand like what that feels like, and I think kind of like the haunting beauty of Coates' writing is that, you know, I never really had a way to put that in words until now. And I would say, and this is like a story that I like briefly shared with a different group, but, you know, I was walking like down the tunnels underneath the SEPTA, and like a woman, like a white student, was coming the other way, and like she was scared, like by like just like seeing me so suddenly, and it was kind of like the elevator effect where you like clutch your purse, and you know that kind of took me back, like all right, like you know, this is how I may be perceived, but I think my truth as far as that is to like not to get used to that. I think that, you know, though we may sometimes feel restricted to that body, we also have the power to define it. And I think it comes through, you know, in like the performances that we give, how we choose to live our lives, and you know, seeing that as just an opportunity to redefine that. Like, I cannot, you know, feel confined to this little mold, so I choose not to live within it, but rather to break it and, you know, recreate that for myself. If that makes sense.
I hope we answered your question.
Yeah, you did.
Any other questions?
You guys mentioned like you chose a passage from Coach's book, like that spoke to you, but like what are your, if you don't mind sharing, like what were your individual like inspirations for choosing those, and then like connecting them with J. Cole's lyrics?
Well, for me, I love music. I'm a hip hop fan. I'm an R&B fan, but I like all types of music. Like I even have country and rock on my phone. It's weird to see like me liking all these different types of genres, but that's just who I am. But for this particular assignment, I chose J. Cole just because, like I said, I know he's known, and other rappers as well. Like he's definitely not the only rapper known to have politically charged rhetoric and rap lyrics. But I just happened to choose that song in particular, and so that's where my path in creating the script kind of started. Even though we were reading the book, that's where it initially started, and then while we were reading Between the World and Me, I saw, like Heidi was able to mention some excerpts. I feel so bad. I totally forgot to mention that I also took excerpts from a spoken word piece, and I completely forgot to mention that. It is a spoken word piece called The Nerd versus the Nigga, and you can look it up on YouTube. So that first part where I was kind of arguing with myself, or two parts of the self, that's where that comes from. So I actually have 3 moving parts in my performance. But when I saw that spoken word piece, along with my J. Cole lyrics, because listening to music on my phone, and then tying in what we were reading in class, it kind of just clicked, you know, because he at one point talks about Howard University being his mecca, and for those of you that read the book know kind of what I'm talking about, and learning how to express himself. He talks about being past weed, like a blunt for the first time, and just learning himself. And so I thought that fit perfectly, because it's that went to be a nerd. He's at a higher education academic institution, but you can't escape that path. He couldn't escape the lessons that he learned growing up. You know, went to the gangs and how to walk, how to dress, that type of stuff. So even though he went to Howard, no matter what institution that he went to, that still would have been a part of him. So that's kind of my path in creating the script, if that makes sense. I hope that answers your question.
And actually, Kiva, before you jump in, I also remember you said something in class about how Coates the voice that he uses when he writes this piece is very academic. It's very to that wider audience of educated, he's creating a persona that's going to speak to a particular audience because he wants them to make sure they hear him, right? That they read it, and so that fit that piece really well of those two different sides of potentially competing sides of yourself. So I thought you drew attention to that in Coates' narrative really well. Okay, now Ivan, do.
Yeah, sure. Also, to answer your question, I think the two most prevalent themes within my performance were God and suffering, and kind of like, what is God, like, where does he fit into this? What is the place of religion? Which is really important for me because, what kind of felt like a stream of consciousness, like a thought that could be singular, said by one person, was kind of this exchange between James Baldwin, who is a man of faith, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is a self-professed atheist. And it's just kind of a scrutiny of that, and because it centers around this whole idea of the sit-ins and like how people were enduring this suffering, kind of for a righteous cause. Where does God fit there? And also to bring in like another hip hop reference, it made me think of like Kendrick Lamar's "Damn," and how there's this idea of like, we're the chosen people, and we're suffering because of this, and just thinking like, oh, is that right? Like, does that actually make sense? Does that fit into this? So, I think for me, thinking about, as J. Cole called it, the black man's plight in the scope of religion, in the scope of God, in the scope of like some sort of reckoning, or maybe is completely detached from that, wholly. So, just trying to like reconcile those two thoughts, those two perspectives, and see like how it fits into us and what it says about us as beings of faith, or being detached from faith. If that answers your question.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm remembering conversations from class 2 here, and I remember you said too, like we talked about how those were two. Baldwin and Coates are voices of a particular generation. Really prominent voices of a generation, and so the way that and so connecting them around these differences with faith and God is it's just very cool.
Just as like black students here and just black people in the world and in America in general, what was the process of, I guess, like when you transfer life experience and try to portray it in art, for me at least, there's like thoughts of how the art relates to my life. So like, can you just speak to like how those particular performances related to your lives as black people?
Yes. Okay, so this performance, I guess I can say that it related to my life because it's actually funny. I did a whole other performance where I really like brought it back to my life. But just, I guess I'm going to be really open. Yes, I grew up in New York City, but I grew up in the projects of New York City. So with the N-word being thrown around just colloquially, it means something totally different in my context, So that was one side of it. So I completely understood that one side of my piece, and just the conversations that I had within my own community, within my family, that it's kind of that rage and, that passion forward type of rhetoric. Then with the nerd, of course, understand that as well, me being like a first generation college student in my family, growing up in a community where I was seen as talking white, like I'm the white girl of my community because I decided to go to boarding school and I'm around white people all the time. That makes me white in my community, but that doesn't take away my blackness in that community, and people not really understanding what I had to go through, and understanding that yes, I am in an academic institution, but all that stuff from back home, all the lessons learned, just like Ta-Nehisi Coates, that sticks with you. Like that doesn't completely leave me, and those lessons that I've learned are with me, and that personality is with me. I'm not And I was never the type of person to try to suppress that. I was always very proud of where I come from because it made me who I am today. You know, the lessons that I learned and the people that I met. So that's really how I connected to my piece. I really, like, that's that kind of battle I have within myself all the time. Am I being too nerdy? Am I being too hood right now? It's kind of like always trying to find that balance. And it's not always easy. And even to further your point, I didn't only think that it was related to me, but I feel like anybody in this audience at Villanova, and even to make it broader, could write or have a script or piece like that, you know, because we all have two sides of the selves, whether you recognize it or not. Like, you say certain things in the class that you won't necessarily say when you're in a conversation with your friends, and vice versa. You have two sides of yourself constantly. We're all here. Most of us are not from here. We come from Jersey, California, all these different states. And that personality, those lessons that we've learned come with us. It's a different side of ourselves that we decide to perform every day. So not only for me did I really connect to it because I made the script and this was my life, but I think that it is kind of universal in that way as well.
I think there are different levels on which I connected with the performance. I think the obvious theme of religion connected with me, just, you know, considering like my own trajectory of my relationship with my faith and feeling out where that has a place in my life. You know, thinking like, is my life fuller with God in it? Do I need it? And I think that it kind of plays into this idea of looking at those sit-ins as like a haunting image, that there are these kinds of like zombies of righteousness that are just staring off into the ether. Because, you know, as Ta-Nehisi Coates put it, you know, why are all of our heroes non-violent? You know, what is the difference between me being militant and me being righteous? And I think that's a struggle that I've kind of always, you know, found myself at odds with, trying to figure out, you know, how am I going to carry myself in this world? You know, having that black body, having it kind of being in danger at any given moment. And I think it's just kind of a way to sort out that kind of tumultuous thought process and be trying to like make sense of everything and get kind of my affairs in order in that regard. And I think as of right now, like, you know, I am like a believer. I was raised Catholic rather, and you know, I do find space in my life for that. But like, I also try to keep in mind the ways that, you know, I can't fall on the sword. Like, I can't allow my body to be taken because of my race. So how do I do that? How do I mitigate Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? And that's the answer that I still don't have for myself, but I think that's why it spoke to me so much, because I am trying to like make sense of that, and I'm trying to put it in its proper place.
I would just add real quick, in terms of art in general, why art matters, art of all kinds, because it's experience that inspires some kind of expression, artistic expression. Then the expression itself is going to lead to new experience of what it is, which then leads to new need to express, and then new experience. And you know, I mean, it's just this. It's a cyclical, generative kind of phenomenon, and it's it's why art matters. Whether you are creating it through story, through other ways of or experiencing it, viewing it, audiencing it. Like you said, he says he phrases things that speak to you and make you understand something that you knew but hadn't had words for. That's what art does.
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
So, in the book, Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about those that believe they are white. And I guess my question is, with you kind of being in the minority in this space, which is Villanova, do you feel like when addressing issues of whiteness and what it represents, white supremacy, white privilege, do you have to kind of be politically correct in this space because you don't want other students on campus to kind of, condemn you or ostracize you and kind of see you as something other than a Villanova student? Do you ever feel like you gotta kind of like water your message down a little bit?
speak personally from how I like to address the situation. And I guess with the term of politically correct, I kind of think of it as a spectrum. You know, if you can never be like completely politically correct in certain situations, and it's kind of always a spectrum for me. But sometimes, I don't know, I feel like I'm very raw with my feelings and how I address things, and maybe that's not always the good approach, but I like to tackle it, like I said, in a raw way. Like, sometimes that politically correct approach is best based on the situation, but here at Villanova, I think, specifically my personal opinion is that we like to tiptoe around certain situations a lot and not really say what it is, you know, like, or we have situations where you're just preaching to the choir, you know, it's like we're having racially charged dialogue and discourse with all minorities in the room. It's like, well, are we really getting somewhere if we're doing that? So with me, I think that it's better just to put it all out there, and we will sift through it together in a real raw way. Like, this is how it is. We don't necessarily have to always be politically correct, because the things that we're discussing are not usually politically correct. You know, we're not discussing things that were politically correct, so why are we taking that approach all the time? That's just my personal viewpoint and my take on it.
Right. And to piggyback off that, I think, you know, your question is really important because it underscores this kind of fallacy that we solely or carry the majority of the burden to facilitate these conversations, and that we bear some sort of responsibility to, you know, be PC and, like, protect the feelings and honestly, like, I don't feel it's my personal duty to, like, make sure that the privileged are comfortable in a conversation about privilege. Like, it should be uncomfortable by necessity. And it should create a sort of unrest in your soul when you talk about this, because it means that, you know, we're getting at the heart of something. We're getting at the root of something. And if I feel like, you know, I'm part of a group that's not in power, then, like, you know, these could be the grievances. And, like, you just kind of have to deal with that. So I would say, no, I don't feel that pressure, but I understand why it exists, and I think it is exactly why we should approach conversations like this without the mission to meet someone in the middle, because I don't think, you know, there's no middle for us, you know. We shouldn't feel the need to compromise in those kind of conversations. They should be honest, and they should be spaces where you can share, but that doesn't necessitate comfort, and I don't think it should.
I just had a question for you all. I know we're up here answering your questions, and it's great. I really appreciate that you guys are really into our performances and what we came here for today. But my question to pose to you all is how your reactions and how you feel your personal life, if it does, fits to our performances in any way. How you personally related, like we did our performances on how we personally related to Ta-Nehisi Coates and his work, but if you guys personally see yourselves and your personal life fitting to our work in any way, just out of curiosity. If it doesn't, feel free to say so. But I feel like it's not only for Black people to relate, but anyone, regardless of your background, is able to relate. But that's just my opinion. I'm just wondering if it does and if that holds true.
The nerd and the nigga thing is really real. Like, being too Black for white people and not Black enough for Black people. It's like,
Did you all hear in the back what he said? Can you say it again?
I just said, like, the nerd and the nigga was really powerful because, like, the idea of being too Black for white people and not Black enough for Black people.
I kind of agree. I definitely agree with that. You know, it's like you said, you want to, I guess in the hood, you want to be real. But it's like, how is me going to a Villanova not being real? Or how is me Tamir Rice without getting killed, or Sandra Bland without getting killed, or Omar Castile without getting killed? Can I be these people, you know, and live a fruitful life? And that's my struggle, you know, is how do we get to a place where that's not happening anymore? You know, because it's like, all you see is Emmett Till all over again. Like, past how long is it going to last? You know, and that's what I really connect with, you know, that's what I connected with your performances. You know, is that you're kind of articulating a certain experience. And that's what, you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates did so well. He articulated an experience, a struggle. So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
You know, one of the threads running through that whole book, which I think is like the crux of the book, is what you brought up before, which is people who think they're white. That phrase, right? Anyone who thinks they're white, and he keeps bringing that up, and he's kind of talking to those people, and that was something that that I was really curious to see what students in the class would understand from that. What would they not understand from that? How would they make sense of that? And it was hard. Like I think some people in class, I'm not sure they ever I think it was a struggle to really kind of live with that and understand what he was trying to say about that. But it provided an opening, and so in a way I kind of wish some of the white students had been in here to share too, just to hear. And that's partly why I was like, when Tina couldn't do hers, I was like, I gotta at least say those words, because just to get, to see how does it come out of different bodies when you hear these words coming out of different bodies and different voices and different experiences, and everybody's experience is different. But so I think that, but I think that phrasing about people who think they're white is something that everywhere, but on this campus in particular, it's a good question to interrogate. I don't know how those of you who have read the book, how you understood it, or what it made. I don't know if you want to share any of that, or your experiences here. I don't want to force people to speak, but there have been a few of you asking great questions, offering great comments, but.
Also, did someone drop their water? Is it a bottle of water rolled down?
Oh, did it roll down?
Yeah.
Oh, it rolled down. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Something that's on my mind is we had Cornell West here last week, and there seems to be on Twitter kind of a disagreement, if you will, between Cornell West's view of Ta-Nehisi Coates' book and success, if you will. And I was curious if that has come up for anybody else in this, well, with your performance in terms of Ta-Nehisi Coates being too white compared to Cornell West being more black or something like that.
Defined how? Like how is it?
Well, I mean, I can't think of the name of the podcast, but it's a guy that used to be on ESPN, and Ta-Nehisi Coates was on that podcast talking about how, he was talking about his most recent book, but he was talking about how fame has whitened him. He's had all this sort of financial success, and he's struggling with that because he's being pushed into spaces that he's not comfortable with, and yet he just sort of talks about sort of being more successful equals being more white, and it's a struggle. But he also talked about the fame associated with the success of his book and the cost associated with that. And anyway, I'm just.
But Cornell West is in those spaces too,
No, but yeah, right.
right?
I don't really know if I have a question. It was just like one of these things that I'm not really sure how Ta-Nehisi Coates' success. The way that I understood Cornell West's criticism, at least online, was about how successful and more white he's that
I see there's two sides of the coin. I don't have an answer, but the way I know it's hard to answer, but I just see it as two sides of the coin, and I just leave it at that. Like at one point, on one side, I say, well, okay, two black men or black women, whoever, two black people that have differing viewpoints should be able to have differing viewpoints. Like, we shouldn't always have to be on the same page about everything at the end of it. Like, you try to categorize as black people, which I already have issues with because I'm like, right, that's a color, but whatever. But yeah, I think you should be able to have your differing viewpoints, and I don't think that it should be related always to whiteness. Like, your proximity to whiteness just means that your proximity to greatness, and that's how it gets equated in a way sometimes, and I don't agree with that at all. So I think I have a problem with that in one, and then also a problem with that whole struggle with two black people not being on the same page, and then that being the main focus on, oh, there's issues in the black community because these two black people don't agree. It's like, okay, come on now. But then the other side of the coin is like, I think that it's a good thing to show that there can be differing viewpoints, and that's okay. You know, like, at one point I'm like, I'm upset that they're arguing over that, but another side I'm like, well, that's actually kind of good that there is discourse and it is being shown that there are differing opinions. Like, we're a collective because you put us in a collective of black people, but we have different opinions, and we're not always going to be on the same page. You have to start recognizing that it's growing, like things are evolving, and it's starting to be shown that yes, like I said, we have differing viewpoints, and having people being okay with that, and that's where I'm struggling with. I'm like, okay, I want more differing opinions because yes, like, we're getting there. But then the other side, I'm like, but why? You know? So, and that, I just leave it at that because, like you said, it's just hard. We're not really going to come to an answer. We're just going to see how it plays out. The only thing that I can definitively say that I have a problem with is just the proximity to whiteness and why that always has to come up. Right. Because I don't think that should have anything to do with it. Just because you're getting fame and money, you're closer to whiteness. That's closer to greatness. Closer to, you know. That's what I have an issue with.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to it, just because I don't know enough about the situation. I'd have to do my due diligence and research that before I form an opinion. But I do pretty much agree with what Deanna said. Diversity of thought is super important. And, you know, perhaps just an increase in economic status can be seen as a privilege, obviously. So I kind of understand why he might feel that way, but again, I'd have to research that some more.
Well, if anyone has anything more they'd like to add, we can certainly talk. I actually have no watch and no phone near me, so I have no idea what time it is because that clock is completely wrong. Oh, okay, so we're close to the end. Yeah, I guess I just want to thank you all for your attention, and if there was something that you wanted to ask or say, but you didn't want to share it in this, publicly, please, come up and talk to Kevon or Deanna or me, and I hope you go see some more cool sessions today. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.